All right, hi everybody. Welcome to the first of our town hall series. My name is Alex Bingham. I'm the president of the Find the Light Foundation, and I'm here with Aimee Robertson, who is a candidate for the Fort Zumwalt Board of Education. So quickly to start, I'm just going to go over a little bit of our process here since this is the first one, and please bear in mind that since this is the first one, there might be some technical difficulties. Just bear with us if that happens. So as I think everybody here knows, we have been collecting questions from the community. That's parents, teachers, students. We've got some questions from bus drivers, employees of the district. Yeah, it's going to be really exciting. We have a lot of very great questions about a ton of different topics. So we're going to move through as many as we can. Basically, we took all of the questions submitted and then we used a computer to randomize them. All of the candidates will get the same questions in the same order. We've got about an hour slotted to answer those questions. Whatever we don't get to, we'll give to each of the candidates and let them answer them or not on their own time. After 1 hour, we're going to open up the floor, and Aimee and all of our other candidates in the future town halls will be able to interact with all of you. And so when that happens, I'll explain again, but we'll just use the raise hand feature for anybody that has questions. Just a little bit of background on Find the Light Foundation. We are a nonprofit that came from the Fort Zumwalt School District from their students. And our mission is to reduce suicide and overdose deaths in teens and young adults specifically. And we do that by elevating student voices. So that's basically what this is. We're trying to get everyone involved in the election, and we want to make sure that everyone's represented and has a chance to ask the candidates whatever questions they have. So Aimee, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Aimee Robertson. I have 6 children who are in the district. One is actually an alumni, and the other 5 range from 4th grade through a senior. 2 of my children have special needs. They're profoundly deaf and they're on the spectrum. We've been in the district 12 years. This July will be 12 years. I'm a board certified behavior analyst. I specialize in early intervention. So the babies on my caseload range from 17 months to 36 months, give or take. I'm a big believer in open communication for problem solving. I'm really big on educational advocacy. That's really what brought me to looking into Board of Ed in the first place, is because I believe it's really important that we're taking good care of our IEP kids. They represent 15.4%, give or take, of Fort Zumwalt's student body. And they are important little humans, just like everyone else. So that's kind of what guided me toward looking at Board of Education.
All right, awesome. So we've got a lot of questions to get through, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Just as a reminder to everybody, we're going to open up the floor for questions at 7 o'clock. So if you will keep your microphones on mute until then, that'll make this all go a lot smoother. All right, so our first question is about mental health, because that is what our foundation is here for. And we did not record any names. Most people wanted to remain private.
Absolutely.
So they're just a collection of questions from the community. We did not submit any of our own. These all come from teachers, parents, and students and staff members. All right, so the first question is, do you have any ideas on how to help our schools cope with the current mental health crisis our youth are facing?
So that is a great question. That's actually one of the priorities that I have listed as a priority that I have for the school district. And I do have some ideas. The first one being, we need to understand what the mental health situation actually is. We need to really get the opportunity to understand, is it students, is it staff, is there a certain demographic age-wise that is in need? I would suspect it's probably across the board. I think we have to recognize and very much honor the fact that there will be parents who do not want their children to participate in mental health resources through the school district, and we need to respect that, just like we respect a lot of other things that families are uncomfortable with. And I think that once we have a picture of what's really going on in the district, then we can begin to make some actionable plans. I would love to see students at least understanding where they can get resources, that we can do a slightly better job of helping them know where they can go for help if they need help. Certainly emergency mental health help, where can I go for help with that? And I would love to see what we can do to talk about finding areas where we can educate kids on recognizing what their feelings are, recognizing what their emotions are, and then being able to cope with them. but that's going to really require some experienced professionals to help us with that. So I think it's not like a snap your fingers and there's an easy solution situation. I think this is going to be a multi-step situation that's going to require the participation of students, staff, parents, the entire educational community, really, really researching and understanding, and then moving forward in the best interest of everyone in the educational community.
All right, awesome. Obviously, that's a pretty significant issue for a lot of the people watching this. So our next question is, how can students be involved in the district decision-making process? We hear a lot about stakeholders, and often students are the stakeholders that are not always consulted, and they do have pretty strong opinions and experiences that we can use.
So I think that the voice of the student is really, really, really missing in this whole discussion. They are, at the end of the day, the biggest stakeholders that we have in the educational community. They're the ones who are going to be most impacted by every decision that we make. You know, I love when students come to Board of Ed meetings and share their thoughts, whether it's something they would like to see, something that they don't like, but I don't see it happening very often. One thing I would love to discuss is possibly finding a way that we can have maybe a representative from each high school that comes and brings the thoughts of his or her peers, preferably behind closed doors. I don't ever want a student to be put out where they can be nitpicked, but be able to come and share the feedback of their peers to the school board. I would love to see either like a suggestion box or a QR code that students can scan that goes directly to, hey, I have an idea that the Board of Ed gets, but maybe that student doesn't want to be identified for who they are, because we don't hear their voices very much in terms of the decision making. Can we always do what they want? No, I can't give you 7 hours of recess. I can't put more vending machines in the middle school. I can't do those things. But I would love to hear what the kids think about their own educational community. And so I have ideas like what I've just mentioned. It's just a matter of making them actionable, as well as, for example, if we did use a student leadership model, safe for those students so that, you know, they're not pinned for saying something that maybe the entire population doesn't agree with. So I just want to give them a safe space and then kind of go from there.
Absolutely. All right, so the next question is, aside from the business aspects of how the district is run, what types of ideas do you have to help students in the Fort Zumwalt School District be successful and well-rounded before they graduate high school?
So I think we really need to promote exploration of interests with our kids. We spend a lot of time really focusing on those core courses, and those core courses are exceptionally important. But I think too, when we have a student who shows interest, for example, in art, they maybe have interest in interior design, they have interest in wood shop, those different vocations. I would love to see more opportunities for the skilled trades to be represented. You know, if a child or a student has already chosen to sign up for wood shop or for metal shop or for interior design, how fantastic would it be to be able to reach out to the skilled tradesmen in the community and help them connect? Maybe they come and do a presentation in the school in those classes where those kids are already showing an interest. Certainly, I want to make sure that we're providing opportunities for kids to know where they can get scholarships to whatever they want to do after they're done graduating. But I think that we have to be open to exploration of different fields of study and different career paths. And I feel like Fort Zumwalt does a pretty good job of that to begin with. I would just love to take what we're already doing so well and expand on that even further.
Awesome. This next question I know comes from a student. They asked, how can the school district address student drug addiction? Just say no isn't enough.
That is a fantastic question. And I think that student is very insightful for recognizing that just say no is not enough. Some of that is going to come back to what we talked about in that very first question. It's going to come back to mental health, right? Because we want to make sure that our students are mentally healthy enough that they don't feel that they have to turn to drugs to deal with some of their situations or some of the stress that they may have. I think we also could do some outreach, some community outreach, and make opportunities for students to have role models, right? That have made better decisions and that can kind of help guide them through. I think we need to be doing maybe more than just the DARE program. It sounds like that student's trying to tell you that the DARE program is not enough. And, you know, really spend some time as kids get older into some of those decision-making ages where we start to see more experimentation, where we're having really frank conversations with them about the risks of drugs, alcohol, all of these different addictive entities that are so dangerous to them. And so, you know, I don't know where we do a lot of the DARE work. I know predominantly it seems to be in 5th grade, but I don't know very well. I don't have a great picture of how well does that carry into middle and then into high school. Are we just touching on it in high school health class, or are we really having these frank discussions with kids to help them make different decisions? Are we giving them access to what the other decision could be? So we're saying, say no is not enough. Okay, well, you've told me no, but can you tell me what I can say yes to? And that might be the question that we need to do a better job of answering. What can the student say yes to that is not a drug or addiction?
Yeah, that's an interesting approach. And I think that's one that several organizations in the community have started to take. This next question is from a parent. How would you like to see the district evaluate learning and developmental deficits from mask wearing in schools?
I think that's a loaded question. I think that if we want to be able to assess, phrase it for me one more time.
The question is, how would you like to see the district evaluate learning and developmental deficits from mask wearing in schools?
Okay, so I think we have a picture of that a little bit. We just recently had the district academic performance review, and we did see that across the state since COVID, we have seen a decline in our academic performance. We've had some learning loss. The question becomes, how much of that is mask wearing and how much of that is other COVID mitigation? How much, there's just so many loaded things. I think it's very difficult to be able to isolate mask wearing as the only variable. Do I think mask wearing likely had some impact for some students' learning? 100% I do. I think that's something that we can't pretend hasn't happened. Do I think it is the variable that has caused learning loss? I think that is a fat no for me, because there's just so many variables involved. We're not having nearly as much interaction. We've been a lot more cautious. Families themselves, not just in school, but families themselves have chosen, you know, to maybe not engage in quite so much community stuff, group gatherings, going to the grocery store. If we want to talk about developmental delays, and we might be even talking about that younger demographic, you know, we have toddlers who they probably don't go to library story time as much as they used to. Maybe they're not going to the grocery store with mommy and daddy. There's just so many variables. I would be very, very interested in studies. I would just ask how they would intend to study masking as the only variable contributing to some of these delays.
Okay, and just to follow up on that, obviously that was about the district evaluating deficits. How would you address learning loss, or how should the district address learning loss, regardless of the cost?
Well, I think, you know, the district is discussing it. It was something that was actually discussed at this week's Board of Education meeting. They are definitely making every effort to make summer learning programs available. They're discussing ESY, but ESY is for your kids under the IDEA umbrella. They also have a number of learning opportunities for over the summer, including courses even for high schoolers where they can catch up on some of their courses or where they may have fallen behind. I think we have to address it by first acknowledging that there has been a learning loss. And then we need to get back to figuring out, okay, where is our current baseline and what can we do to get to the baseline that we would like to be at? Then we also have to look at what has been an effective teaching tool, what has worked really well, and how can we take those components that worked really well and apply them to the areas where we've experienced learning loss. So it's kind of a loaded question. I think we have to acknowledge that there has been learning loss. We have to do as much outreach as we can to make sure parents even know that some of these summer courses are available. We have to help make sure that students are having access during the regular school year to whatever reading, recovery, tutoring programs that the district is offering. And then we have to move forward from there with more intensive learning. But first we have to even know what our baselines are.
Okay. The next question is from another parent. I addressed the school in October about having a mental health class for students. How do you feel about this class? Would this be something that you would support?
This is something I support 100%. I think there are some logistics involved that really have to be taken into consideration. We need to make sure that students would not then be required to give up another course for it. We want to make sure that they're not having to give up something else that they themselves may deem equally important. We have to make sure that whatever we're choosing to do with it is applicable and that we're giving students something actionable. The other thing I want to make sure that we're doing that I kind of alluded to in the beginning is I want to make sure that parents have access to whatever that curriculum is going to be so that there's full transparency, so that there's no question as to what is being taught to their student, so that they don't have to worry that somebody is trying to guide their child in a way that they, for their own family, are uncomfortable. So I think there's a need for it. I think it's an important thing to do. I think we should definitely be looking at it. I also think we have to be fair about the fact that probably are some logistics involved, but it's something that I was at that meeting and I remember that conversation from that parent, and it has been a priority of mine ever since.
Do you think that's something that could be worked into the existing health curriculum?
Potentially. The problem with just saying we're going to work it into the existing health curriculum is that the existing health curriculum spends a couple of weeks talking about mental health and then embodies a lot of other health issues. And I think that the point that parent was trying to make when they spoke at that meeting was 2 weeks where we sort of gloss over it is not really enough. It's as effective as the Just Say No campaign, right? It's telling us that it's not effective. We need to talk about what we can say yes to for our kids. And so I'm open to it being part of the health curriculum. It's just a matter of how it's part of the health curriculum. Is it just a chapter? Is it just a 2-week unit? Or is it something that is ongoing and actionable? Because at this point, what we need is ongoing and actionable.
Absolutely. And I can tell you just from what we're hearing from students over the past 2 years since we started the foundation, there is demand for a class like that from students as well.
I agree.
This next question touches on another of the more hot button topics. Where do you stand on the issue of banning books, like in the case of the Wentzville School District?
This is a very hot topic. So I'm going to tell you, I'm a prude. I have not watched an R-rated movie since 1998. I watched Amistad. That was the last one. But we have Netflix in our home. I have not yet reached out to Netflix and demanded they get rid of everything that's R-rated because I'm uncomfortable with it. I have turned on my filter. And that's sort of what I feel would be an effective compromise in the district, is to have that list of challenged books and have those books perhaps in a section of the library where students can borrow them, but only with a signed written permission from their parents. The other component that I would add to that is, I know my son perpetually has an overdue book, and I get an auto-generated email every single day at about the same time saying, your child has the following title overdue. That tells me that we're able to auto-generate an email at the time that the student borrows it. So should a book not be in the challenged book section that I talked about, but it still be a book that maybe a parent is uncomfortable with? I know there are some parents who are uncomfortable even with Hunger Games in middle school, and I respect that. So if they got an auto-generated email the minute their child borrowed that book, then they would have the option to take the book back to the school immediately because they would be aware that it's been borrowed.
Okay. And the next question is an area I know you're familiar with based on your introduction. How are you going to advocate for and support special education and related service providers in the district?
So that is a really, really, really big thing for me. I've been doing educational advocacy for a really, really long time. IEP or 504 students represent about 2,700 students in the Fort Zumwalt School District. Overall, Fort Zumwalt does a pretty good job of drafting phenomenal IEPs and 504s. The trouble comes in when a kid maybe is in that gray area, maybe their plan is not being used appropriately or as effectively as it could be. Maybe the teachers have 125 kids on their list and they don't have the opportunity to really effectively read through. So I think it's important that we be advocating for parents. I would love to see more parent advocacy provided by the school district to help prepare parents for IEPs. I would love to see more opportunities for us to teach students to advocate for themselves. One thing that I have been really proud of with my two boys is It took us a really long time, but they're at a point now where they can self-advocate for, hey, Mrs. Jones, I can't hear you because they are deaf. Or, hey, Mrs. Jones, I see that we are watching a video. I need you to turn on the captioning. It seems like a really simple, small thing, but for them to have learned how to self-advocate for that is a really, really big thing. And not only for them to self-advocate for it, but to also educate the teachers that, hey, my kid's not trying to correct you. He's not trying to call you out, but I need you to respect that he's using his words and saying, can you please turn up the volume? Can you please caption that? And so, if we could come to a point, particularly with our middle and high schoolers, and even some of those upper elementary grades, where students can know what's in their IEP, they can know what's in their 504, and they can feel comfortable and safe advocating for that, would be phenomenal. There are some kids who are not going to be in that position where they are able to use their words or to self-advocate, and I recognize that. And that would come back to this idea that, man, what can we do to help parents effectively advocate for their kids? Are we doing a good enough job of making sure we're assessing? Are we doing a good enough job of making sure parents understand what all those assessments need? Are we doing a good enough job of making sure that the teachers who are being asked to implement these things have the adequate support for it? Because it doesn't matter if you write the most beautiful IEP or 504 plan or behavior intervention plan, if it's not something that's actually feasible for the teacher or faculty member who's responsible for implementing it. So there's a whole lot going on there, but it's going to start with advocating for communication, for effective communication across the board, the IEP team, the 504 team, from the parent, and from the student who is, again, the most impacted by what's been created.
Absolutely, and I'm really glad you brought up the point of advocacy. Just as a quick personal note, I also have a disability, and I didn't learn to advocate for myself until well after high school. So I think that is a really important point, just to drive home advocacy rights of parents and students, and the communication between all groups involved.
Right, absolutely.
This next question is, what is your stance on school choice?
I'm not a fan. And let me tell you why. There's a number of reasons why. The first one being, we already have something good. Is it perfect? No. But by defunding it, we're not going to help make it any better. We're going to pull funds from something and look into something else. Maybe decide we don't like that, pull funds from that, and we've just continued to weaken a system. I'm much more of an advocate of, let's take what we have and make it even better. Let's acknowledge the areas where there's room for growth and invest in that. The other big thing that I think is so important to understand about school choice is the potential impact it may have on our students with diverse learning needs. So for example, my son, two of mine are deaf, as I've mentioned. One of them spent 5 years at the Moog Center for Deaf Education. And 2 of those years were funded by Missouri First Steps, and 3 of those years were funded by the Fort Zumwalt School District. The contracted rate, to my understanding, was $25,000 per year. If we go to school choice or we go to voucher and a student takes somewhere between $8,500 and $11,200 with them that would have been spent on them in the public school, we're not even beginning to scratch the surface. That would be less than half of the tuition rate for that student to have gone to the Moog Center, which is the example that I'm using. On top of that funds that the school district put into the Moog Center, we also have to understand that that's a not-for-profit school that still has to do significant grant writing and have significant fundraising. So, we want to make sure that our kids are getting the highest quality education possible. And we want to make sure that we are in the best funded situation possible for our gen ed kids as well as our IEP and 504 kids. And the problem with school choice or the voucher system is that the funds just don't stretch as far as we'd like to think that they do.
That's a really good point. Very quickly, since we've had some new people join, I'm just going to remind everyone that at about 7 o'clock, we're going to open the floor to questions from you all. Obviously, these are questions from the community, but give everybody a chance to interact with Aimee directly. This next question was actually asked very similarly in the last election cycle, so I'm curious for your answer. The American Medical Association, Academy of Pediatrics, and the CDC all recommend evidence-based and comprehensive sex education programs be offered to students. Will you, as an elected board member, address the need for comprehensive sexual education and also acknowledge that the current program may not be comprehensive?
Yeah, I'm big on data-driven decision making. So if those who are specialists in the field and who have the data to show that what we're doing is ineffective, then that data tells me we have to make a different decision. That said, as I mentioned in other areas of this discussion, I'm a firm believer in providing the parent with the curriculum that would then be taught, just like what we're currently doing now. If a parent is uncomfortable or does not feel that what's being taught is something they embrace in their home, I would also very much support them choosing to opt their child out. I will tell you, for my own family, some of my children, I've opted into the current education that is provided in that area. And some of my children, I believe, need to learn it a different way because they process things so differently. So those kids, I chose to opt out. I'm not super stoked about what we currently have. I do think we need to do something different, and I'm very comfortable with the data-driven decision-making model for that.
All right, awesome. So the next question, obviously we've seen some intense board meetings lately, and that's not unique to Fort Zumwalt, happening all over the country. So how will you manage conflict within the board?
So here's the thing. Communication is such a big, important thing. When I say communication, I don't mean communication to get my point across. Communication is a two-way street. And I think we spend so much time trying to make our point that we're failing to hear the other person. And one of the things that I've had so much success in over the past several months, at least since school has started, is engaging in dialogue with people who don't agree with me. What I will tell you is that I don't often walk away from the table agreeing with them. What I do walk away from the table with is an understanding of why they feel the way that they feel and an understanding of where the common ground is. Because, for example, there is a board member right now who he and I agree on very, very few things, but we have significant common ground where we are able to start from. And the other thing that we have is wonderful mutual respect. I don't agree with a lot of decisions that that individual makes, but I have utmost respect for that person. And I can honestly say I firmly believe he has the same respect for me, even though we don't agree on a lot of things. So I think if we want to be able to start to unify this district, because that's what our kids really need, they don't need us to be this side, this side. They don't need that. They need us to come together. So we're going to have to start by coming to the table and engaging in communication for understanding and for having really open-minded discussions. We don't have to walk away agreeing, but I assure you that if two willing communication partners come to the table with the goal to understand the perspective of the other person and find the common ground, that interaction will be successful. And those are tiny baby steps. It's not an overnight flip, but that's what we need.
And I think that's something that we can all get behind, more compromise. This next question is very simple. It's, do you believe in science?
I very much believe in science. And I believe that we have an obligation when we tell children and teach children about science to also show them that we believe in science. So it's not, hey, science is super great, but we don't necessarily believe in it. That said, I think we also have to recognize that this is potentially maybe a more loaded question than what it appears to be on paper. We have to recognize that what one side of a discussion sees as science may be the exact opposite of what another side of the discussion sees as science. And so, yes, I firmly believe in science. I believe science is actionable. I think it's always evolving, but I think we also have to respect the fact that what I embrace based on the science that I've read may be different from what somebody else embraces based on the science that they have read. And it's possible for two opposite people to be right. It's all about perspective.
All right. So this next question is sort of similar to a couple of places we've touched on before. What do you think it means to work towards an equitable educational experience for our students? Is this something you hope to achieve?
It is. And I think unfortunately equity has been a word that's been tossed around, and now it's kind of a dirty word in some arenas. And so I want to be clear that I believe that equity is not always the same thing. It's not equal, right? And so there was one Halloween, my kids were talking about equity and what it all meant. And I said, okay, when you come back from trick-or-treating, you are putting all of the candy all 6 of you, the candy goes in the same bin and we're going to count it out. And you're each going to get the same amount of each kind of candy that you get. That's how it's going to be fair. And one kid was like, okay, but I can do like a whole block and a half in the time that she can do like 4 or 5 houses. And then another one went, okay, but our oldest kid is like going to die if he gets food with nuts in it. So why should he have to have that? And then our youngest boy, he doesn't like candy unless it's Twizzlers. So can't I just give him my Twizzlers in exchange for his chocolate? And I said, no, everybody gets the same. That's not equity, is it? That's equal. Equity is recognizing each individual student's baseline and figuring out what we need to do to get each kid to the desired baseline so that they all are starting at the same point. So we may have Mikey who comes in and he's at baseline A. Susie comes in baseline C, and then another one comes in at baseline W. What do we need to give each of those individual students to get them all to that same baseline from where we're starting from? The other thing we have to recognize is that giving another kid something more that they may need to be able to catch up does not mean we're having to take away from somebody else. It is not pie. You're not going to lose out on a piece of it because your neighbor got a piece of pie. There's enough to go around. It's just a matter of making sure that the piece of pie that you get is the piece you actually need, that's going to benefit you the most, that doesn't have nuts in it and it's going to kill you. That's what equity is for me. And I think that we need to be okay with looking at each kid as an individual, finding their baseline in each of those different areas of education and giving them what they need to get them to where they need to be at the starting rate to begin with.
All right, this next question, I actually got very similar questions from both a teacher and a bus driver, so we went ahead and combined them. We need additional door locks and latches to use to aid in lockdowns. What is your stance on bettering our safety in classrooms and in other areas such as buses and playgrounds?
I think it's something we need to spend a lot more time looking at, isn't it? I'm finding in my recent study and my recent interviews with different people that, you know, a lot of bullying happens on the bus. And the bus driver's got how many kids? She's got at least 30, 40, 50 kids. That driver's job is to get the kids from point A to point B safely and cannot necessarily recognize that. So that's something we need to recognize. It's my understanding that most classroom doors push out instead of us being able to push them shut. Does that make sense? And so a teacher would have to go out into the hallway, be able to reach the top of that door, bring it in and latch it. And so I think we have to discuss intruder safety, which is what I think we're kind of leaning toward with this question here. And we need to look at some of the specialists who have begun to perfect the school intruder safety procedures in different areas of the country. I've spent a lot of time looking at Sandy Hook Promise. They spend quite a bit of time talking about this. And so I think we have to acknowledge the risk and we have to take the time to invest in making sure that we have done everything in our power to protect our students, protect our teachers, and to protect our entire educational community. And we have to be okay with investing dollars and then hoping and praying we never, ever have to use.
All right, and just a quick follow-up to that. How do you balance security with the need to make a school a welcoming environment? Because we have seen, you know, some schools have metal detectors and things that just make school a less welcoming place, but you also have to balance with security. So what's your stance on that?
Right. And so, you know, that's a tough balance, isn't it? Because safety has to be priority one. But I do not feel okay about kids feeling like they've just walked into a prison when they've walked into school. I think we need to make sure everything is as secure as possible. And I also think that we need to have procedures to get into and out of buildings, you know, in terms of visitors or guests that we're utilizing to full fidelity, that we don't get lax and forget to check this person's ID, forget to ask why that they're there. And so, you know, again, I think this is something that we have to talk to people who already sort of specialize in this to make sure that we're doing it in the best way possible. And so that we have a mentally healthy environment as well as a physically safe and healthy environment. I think one of the things I've noticed that I've come and gone from some of my kids' schools is that fidelity. There's some schools that are fantastic and they check every single time. And then there's others that kind of wave as you're coming in because maybe you're a familiar face to begin with. But even a familiar face should still have to be checked to get in. So I would look at that, but I would also really look at, we need people who specialize in this stuff to give us a little bit more guidance.
Absolutely. So this next question involves the pandemic. Many kids suffer with mental health issues, and educating in the classroom has been a challenge for teachers. What can the school district do to support our teachers going forward to make sure they have training, knowledge, help, and tools to work with kids with all different types of issues returning to school after the pandemic? And that comes from a teacher.
You know, all hail teachers. They have, when COVID first happened, they had a pivot just like that. They had to go from what they've always done, what they've always been taught to do, and overnight they had to switch to a virtual model. Then we finally get back into school and we have kids that are all over the place. Some that lost a significant amount of learning, some that never got to go to full year of kindergarten or whatever. And I think we have to recognize that the teachers' plates are overflowing. We need to figure out and prioritize the most important things for teachers to be doing. And anything we can take off of their plates and divert to somebody else or somewhere else, I think we need to be respectful of their time, their energy, and their mental health, and take those things off the plate. I think we need to be making sure that we are doing everything in our power to make sure that their plan time is their plan time, that their break time is their break time. And then we just need to make sure that we're doing everything we can as well to bring in the supports that teachers need to help other kids catch up. Do we have the learning interventionists that we're supposed to have? Are those specialists in the building as promised? And if they're not, why not? And what are we doing to find those interventionists and put them there? That's been a big question that several teachers have messaged me. Those learning interventionists in the elementary schools are not there to the knowledge of some teachers. Other teachers have said that the instructional coaches, though, have been very helpful. So we need to find out from the teachers. We need to also give teachers a platform where they feel comfortable giving us an honest answer when we ask an open-ended question about what they need. Because if we want to help teachers, then we have to know where teachers feel like they need help. It doesn't make any sense for us to just guess and assume we know what teachers need, but never actually bring them into the discussion. That said, when I try to ask teachers questions, a lot of them are like, oh, I'm off the record, right? Like, you're not going to say who I am. So I think that they're nervous that they're somehow going to have repercussions if they're honest. And so we need to find the way to ask those open-ended questions, not just a survey where your choice is A, B, or C, but a true open-ended question, determine what teachers need, and then make actionable plans to give them the resources they need to succeed in their jobs and getting these kids caught up and dealing with all of the stuff, all the baggage that the kids are bringing with them.
So how do you think that we can make faculty feel safer to speak up and to speak their mind, whether that be anonymity or if they just feel more comfortable addressing them in a non-anonymous fashion?
Well, I think anonymity is one thing that we can offer them, but I think too, how often are we sitting down with teachers in a laid back, not formal setting and just saying, tell me what's going on. Let's just sit back and chill and tell me what's going on. Are we, as administrators, as Board of Education, as principals, as parents, educational community members, are we giving teachers an opportunity to feel comfortable? Are we building rapport with them? Are you going to pour your heart out and express all of your worries and fears to somebody that you think is going to hold it over your head, that you don't have any relationship of trust with? So, before we can ask them to confide in us what their needs truly are, we have to build those relationships of trust. And that comes back to that coming to the table for those conversations to understand rather than just to be understood. And we have to be true to our word. If we say, you can tell me this thing and I'm going to never hold it against you, we have to be true to our word about that. It cannot come back to bite them. Just as if we tell a child, you can share this with me or you can do this thing and I'm not going to punish you for it. We have to follow through with that. It's a two-way street. And so the only way to understand what teachers need is to build the rapport, to sit down and to be their friend in a way so that we can understand what their needs are.
Absolutely. So this next question is, what are some things you think we will have learned from the COVID-19 pandemic with regards to education?
We will have learned that we need to have a plan that's actionable, right? So we learn from history. This is why we teach our kids about history, is so that we can go, okay, this thing happened. What can we learn from it? What we've learned from it is we didn't have a plan. So we need to find a plan that's actionable so that if something like this ever happens again, we already know what to do. And we have to recognize that that plan may require compromise from two sides of discussion. We've learned that the pandemic has become really, really divisive. So part of our action plan also has to be, what are we going to do to bring the community together? Because clearly the community is not going to agree on whatever we decide. And that's going to come back to that communication and coming to the table to understand a lot of things. So that's one of the biggest things, I think, is that we've learned we need to have a plan. We've learned that our kids are exceptionally resilient, but we still have to respect the fact that they are impacted by the decisions that we as adults make on their behalf. We've also learned that teachers' plates do have an edge. There's only so much we can put on their plates. There's only so much we can put on the education of anyone. And so we've learned a lot of things. The question becomes, what are we going to do about what we've learned? How are we going to take that new knowledge and make it actionable? And how are we going to take that new knowledge and make it a proactive plan for what comes next?
All right, so this next question is from a bus driver, and it's a little long, but I think it's super important. How will you handle bus drivers leaving our district to work for other districts that pay more? They're going to Francis Howell, St. Charles, Wentzville, Troy, or even fast food because it's often better pay. We're losing drivers and are overloading buses 3 to a seat, all ages, during a pandemic because Fort Zumwalt will not give us competitive pay. We've tried to change things, talked to the board in the past, and we're just dismissed every time because we're just overlooked at the bottom of the totem pole, like we're just simple-minded bus drivers. How will you handle the overloaded buses and stand up for drivers?
I think it's an issue, and I think hats off to whoever asked that question. Way to be honest and blunt and just lay it out there. I think we have a problem. Missouri is the lowest paying state in the country in terms of our educators, and I'm sure that just trickles right down. It's not just bus drivers that we're paying poorly. We have an embarrassing pay rate for our para support as well. And I think we have to look at the budget. I think we have to figure out what we can do. I think we have to listen to our bus drivers. We need, just like the cafeteria workers, you know, at the day when we were coming back into school, we weren't just looking for, like, you know, all the teachers to be there, but we couldn't go back into school without somebody to get the kids there in the first place. We couldn't go back into school without a custodial crew to make sure that the building was clean and safe and breathable for our kids. We needed to make sure that we had healthy food served and that we were serving it in a way that we weren't risking kids, you know, being too close and exposing each other to this, that, or the other. And I think we undervalue those people. And I think that the comment in that question says that not only are we undervaluing them, but they're getting the message that they're undervalued. And so I think we need to find opportunities for them to come back to the table, let us know what their needs are. And we need to really look at that, because I agree, we're losing bus drivers in droves. We're losing teachers in droves. We're losing parent support in droves. And they're going to other districts that are more competitive and maybe more welcoming. I don't know. But I think we have to look at it. I know that the Missouri legislature finally signed that $1.9 billion of educational funding. And I think we have an obligation to sit down and figure out where that money would be the most useful. And we have to recognize that if we want exemplary schools, we need to have exemplary faculty. If we want exemplary faculty, then we need to do a better job of recruiting and retaining those people. And if we want to retain them, then we have to meet their needs as much as we expect them to meet ours.
Absolutely. And as you said, huge thank you to all the bus drivers, especially with all of the winter weather that we've had lately. I can't imagine that much pressure. I could not be a bus driver.
Nope.
Yeah, and it's a vitally important job, like you said. This next question is, what do you think makes you a better candidate than the other candidates running for school board?
I'm exceptionally passionate about this. This is not something for me that's about politics. This is not about COVID. This is not about wanting to support one side or another. This is about recognizing that what we have here are children and that they are the number one stakeholders in this entire thing. And it's about wanting to come to the table, really look at what we're doing, have open and honest discourse, and make decisions that are in the best interest of every child, to give every child a voice as much as we possibly can. And I bring that to the table. I bring open communication to the table. I bring kindness back, as cheesy as that sounds. When we are able to open arms, have a conversation with kindness, then we can make progress. But at the end of the day, the biggest thing I have is so much passion and belief in these kids. I believe in these kids. I believe in these teachers. I believe in this school district, and I want to do everything I can to protect our public school district and to keep it the wonderful district that it is and continue to enhance what's great and then improve what needs work.
I'll agree with that. I'm very proud to come from Fort Zumwalt, as I'm sure your kids are all proud of coming through Fort Zumwalt as well.
They are. Yep.
This next question is, you touched on it a little bit, but I'm curious to hear you expand. This next question is, how do you think we can work to repair the relationship between our district administration and our teachers?
We got to have communication. We need to have open communication. I will say it over and over and over until you're sick to death of hearing it, but we have to communicate. And again, it cannot just be about, I want to make my point. It has to be communicating to understand. Where are they coming from? What are their needs? Why are they acting and behaving and talking and requesting and running away and doing the things that they do? Help us understand, because right now there's a breakdown, but there's a breakdown in communication. One side doesn't feel listened to, the other side doesn't feel listened to, and we just have this constant battle. We need to sit down and find the common ground and build from there. And it's not going to be an easy thing. It's, again, not going to be something we can fix in one meeting. But if we don't understand, I mean, truly understand who the other person on the other side of this discussion is, then we can't meet their needs any better than they can meet ours.
Absolutely. I apologize. I skipped a question, so I was scrolling back up to find it. This next question is, what is your stance on LGBTQ supports at our schools in the form of Gay Straight Alliance clubs and assistance for students who are transitioning?
I think that they're necessary. Whether or not it is something that applies to my student's life or to my family is irrelevant. It applies to somebody somewhere. And I've had it suggested to me that by providing these supports or providing like a rainbow club or whatever, that we're just giving a kid a place to hide. And I would rebut that with, okay, so if we create a chess club because there are students who have a love of chess in common, are we giving chess players a place to hide? Or are we giving them a place where they can go and feel like they're just part of the group? This is something they have in common. I do support, particularly at the middle school level, parents knowing what their kids are doing. But at the middle school level, there's no club that your child can join without a parent signature. At the high school level, it's a little bit different because your kid can say that he's going to Joe's house after school and instead say after and do a club. And we need to work on making sure that parents feel as much a part of the equation as possible and still keep our kids safe. But I think we have to acknowledge that there are children and families who fit under the LGBTQ umbrella, and that they are just as important as children who don't fit under that umbrella. And that by providing them a resource and an outlet to meet their needs, we are taking nothing away and imposing nothing on the students who choose not to be involved in that.
Absolutely. This next question has two parts. How do you think we can make Board of Ed meetings less chaotic? And what do you think is the main role of the BOE?
The main role of the Board of Education, I'll answer that first, is the education of our children. It is to help every student reach his or her highest academic potential. That should be our number one goal. That should be the thing that we're working to. In order to make it less chaotic, that's going to be on us in a lot of ways, isn't it? It's going to have to be our decision to come to the table and to hear what the board is saying with that open mind and, approaching patron comments with the willingness to hear and understand others and to hear what they're trying to say while we're also getting our message across. I think too, if we want to be a little bit less chaotic, we take advantage of our opportunity to communicate our needs and wants with our Board of Ed members prior to the meeting, so they already know what's on our mind. I know a lot of people are spending time sending emails, and I think that is fantastic. But, there's not many board members. There have been a couple who I've said, hey, I would love to actually chat with you. And the majority of them, at least 6 of them, I can honestly say have been responsive to, yeah, let's talk. And so if we want to be a little bit chaotic, we can do a lot of it outside the board meeting of that expressing our needs and our wants so that when the board goes in, they already know. I think it would also be less chaotic if as a board, we've already done our research coming in, right? We already know the topics that are going to be discussed. It's not a big surprise, like, woohoo, hey, here's a surprise, we're dropping this bomb. No, the agenda is given to board members prior to. And are we spending time prior to the meeting looking into some of the topics that are going to be up for discussion and trying to gain an understanding? There's a limit to how much they can do as a board off the record, because there's rules about that, right? But they can still be looking to the community, looking to people that specialize in some of the topics that will be covered, so they can already have an idea of what the needs are and how they want to approach that. It's not going to be an easy fix, because Board of Education meetings are still kind of hot right now. There's still a lot of contention in the community.
Absolutely. So this next question is, what does having an inclusive classroom mean to you? How will you ensure diversity and inclusion is occurring in the district?
So inclusion means a lot of things, right? For me, it means everyone has a seat at the table and everyone has a voice at the table. And that includes color, it includes religion, it includes shape, it includes family style, it includes diverse learning needs, it includes all of those things. And it's a matter of making sure that everyone actively has the opportunity to participate as much as they want to. You know, inclusion has been a really hot topic for me because of my own children. And not all of them have always felt included. And what I've learned is that sometimes we inadvertently put this group over here. It's just easier to teach them over here. It's easier for them to all eat lunch together over here. And we need to do a better job of normalizing mixing it all up. And we do a really great job of it in elementary school, right? In elementary school, like, everybody comes and sits at the table together, and you know, the kid that's maybe in the iLab or in the resource classroom, he gets to come and eat with us too, and he gets to come and do recess with us too, and oh, that's just Joey, and he, you know. Then get to middle school, we start to like, oh, well, they have classes over there. Then we get to high school, and it's like, well, they have classes over there, and they eat over there, and they're happy over there. And I want to have more opportunities for students to mix with each other, from every walk of life, from every ability to mix with each other, because at the end of the day, when they graduate high school and go off into their own communities, whether they stay here in Fort Zumwalt or they spread their wings and fly, those individuals that they had the opportunity to mix with or not mix with are also going to be part of their community, no matter where they go. And so wouldn't it be wonderful if we can already have come to a point where we're comfortable with each other and can embrace each other's differences and enjoy each other because of our differences rather than despite our differences?
Absolutely. So jumping off of that, we actually got a lot of questions about IEPs. I know we've talked about a few already. This next question also deals with inclusive classrooms and IEPs. Please share your thoughts on what role the IEP/504 process plays in a public system. How will you ensure those students on IEPs and 504s are included in decision-making that affects their access to curriculum?
Well, I think, you know, as much as possible, we should be, and we do this pretty much from middle school up, inviting kids to be part of their own IEP and 504 discussions. They can't necessarily all of the time understand everything that's being said, but I think they should be allowed to come to the table. Once my boys were old enough to understand what was going on, I did often ask them, do you like, do you enjoy having your para, or do you want to not have a para anymore? Do you feel like you benefit from this pull-out resource that you have, or this push-in resource that you have? So I kind of had a picture from them about that. But, you know, it is difficult to make sure that we are implementing these documents, these 504s and these IEPs, the way that they're written. It's really challenging. I'm not sure that we're giving teachers enough resources to do it. We're really good at writing them, but then when it comes to using them to fidelity, you know, these teachers can only do so much. And so we need to make sure that we're giving them the resources for it. I think we benefit from, prior to writing an IEP, getting feedback from the person who's going to have to then implement it. And then, you know, what are we doing in terms of taking our data and ensuring that these resources are being fully utilized? That's something I think we can really look at, and it's something that's actionable. Are we helping keep track of ensuring that these accommodations with 504s and resources with IEPs are truly being utilized to fidelity, or is that something that we can improve upon? And taking data on that would be helpful in our decision making.
All right, and I know this next question was asked multiple times. Are you willing to respect expert opinions on various issues, specifically public health and safety within the district?
Yeah, I really like having experts guide me on things that I'm not an expert in. And so, yes, I'm big on data-driven decision-making and reasonable decision-making. And so wherever possible, yes, if there is somebody who is a specialist or who has a lot more knowledge than me in a certain area, I'm much more comfortable taking feedback and guidance from those individuals.
All right, so this next question comes from a teacher. How are you going to support teacher salaries being more aligned with other districts to keep experienced staff who have worked for the district long-term?
That's going to be a similar answer to the bus driver question. We need to acknowledge the fact that we are number 50 in the country for paying our teachers. I looked at our salary scale and I've compared it to the other districts in the county, and we're only in the middle. We are not number one anywhere. We're not doing a whole lot sometimes, I believe, to acquire and retain some of these really exemplary teachers that we have. And so, you know, I can't claim that I'm going to go become a board member and go flip switch and suddenly give everybody a $10,000 a year raise. I would love to do that. But what I can tell you is that I want to spend quality time really looking at the budget and figuring out what we can do to meet the needs of these teachers, because the inflation and the increase in income for all different professions has not been the same as what we're seeing for teachers. We're way behind in terms of increasing our teacher salaries and meeting their needs. And, you know, when I see teachers that are lifeguarding over the summer to make sure that they can make ends meet, or when I see teachers or any faculty member that also has to DoorDash or Uber or whatever to make ends meet, I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned that we have people with 4- and 6-year degrees who are not making enough to put a roof over the table or over the head and food on the table, because we have some exceptional educators, both as teachers, as administrators, as para support, as cafeteria support, as bus drivers. And we need to recognize that we are putting more and more and more and more and more on them, but we are not reimbursing them for that in any way, and it's a problem.
Right, and obviously the current pandemic is one of the most significant issues facing all of the candidates. I'm sure that's why a lot of people are following this election. I'm sure that's why a lot of people are running in this election. So this next question is, what are your views or opinions of the FZSD Board of Education and how they've handled the COVID-19 challenges so far? What would you have done differently, and what changes would you make for the future?
That's a loaded question. I feel like we waited a little bit longer than I am comfortable with to take the guidance of those who specialize in health, in school health and public health. We took a little too long to decide that we were going to go with their guidance. And so we've kind of looked like this district that sort of has flip-flopped back and forth and back and forth. That said, they had no experience in any of this prior to the pandemic happening. So I cannot claim for 2 seconds that I would have done a better job. I can't claim that. I can't claim that I would have been pro-mask, that I would have been anti-mask. I don't know, because none of us have experienced that before. And I think that whether or not we agree with any of the decisions that have been made, we have to acknowledge the phenomenal work that this Board of Education that's currently sitting has put into this. And we have to acknowledge that whatever decisions each of them as individuals have made, they as individuals do believe was the best decision, even though we don't always agree with it. That said, I'm comfortable with the policy that we currently have. It's actionable, it's proactive, tells us when we're going to trigger this, that, or the other. And so I'm comfortable with saying, you don't have to wear a mask. Kids don't have to wear a mask. But if we get to a building where we have more than 4% positivity, now we're looking at too many kids not being in the building and too many teachers not being in the building because we have a high rate of spread, which means they're not getting the exemplary education they deserve. And so that's when we say, okay, we're just going to mask until we're below 4% for 10 days, and then we're mask optional again. Should those people who specialize in this kind of stuff come out and say, we have a better plan that's even more of a compromise and that allows even more of a quote unquote normal learning without masking, I'm open to that. I just haven't found it yet. So I'm comfortable with the policy that we have right now because I feel like it's a compromise. As of right now, our numbers are so low that we are completely mask optional throughout the entire district, but we have a safety net if something happens and we see a big spike. And so to me, that is allowing the mask optional choice to be there, but having an insurance policy if something happens so that we don't have to rush to the table, have an emergency meeting and scratch our heads trying to figure out what we're going to do.
All right, and I think, let's see. It is now 7 o'clock, so I'm gonna ask our last question. Got a few more questions that I'm gonna send to you and you can answer on your own page or however you want to do it.
Sure.
But the last question that we're asking all of the candidates is, what steps will you take to unite our school community after several years of division?
We have to communicate. I want parents to know, and I have already begun, I've been doing this for months and months, I'm making myself available. That is the biggest thing we can do to bring unity, right? We need to make ourselves open and available to talk to one another, to communicate with each other, to communicate our needs and our wants and why we have those needs and wants, and then common ground. We have to find common ground. We all have blood pulsing through our veins. That's something we have in common. We all care about our kids, whether or not we agree on the best way to educate them or the best way to meet their needs, that doesn't matter. The common ground we have is that we all care about these kids. And so for me, it's going to be communication, finding common ground, and building on it over and over and over and over.
Absolutely. I think common ground is something everybody can get behind.
Pretty huge.
So at this point, we're going to open up the floor if anybody wants to use the raise hand feature to ask Aimee a question or just talk with her. We're going to start with Bridget, if you want to unmute.
Hi, Aimee. I was wondering, I'm sure that, well, I know that you saw the board meeting last week, I think it was, and we saw the mothers who got up and were speaking about the horrible things that their child was being called at school. And the board seemed to almost just dismiss them. And I know that they're not supposed to respond, but how would you have handled that differently if you were on the board?
You know, it's tough because they're not supposed to respond. But so I'm going to just clarify what the situation was, what the discussion was. 3 women who are minorities came and they stood together, and during the patron comments, they indicated that their children have been called the N-word a lot more than they ever in a lifetime should ever hear. And it is 2022 and this is ongoing. And I don't know that even those board members at that moment were prepared for how to respond to that, because that's such a heavy thing. But I'm hoping that as board members, they immediately reached out to those women and said, we need to talk, and we need to talk now, and we need to hear what your needs are. I can tell you, I have done that. I am planning to meet with those women. And can I promise to fix it? No, I sure can't. But I need to hear what their needs are. And I want to find something actionable that we can begin to do, to begin the healing process, to begin the educating process, and to begin to protect those kids. After that conversation, I've had a few different people reach out to me. One is a mother who has a younger child in an elementary school who is a child who's biracial and who is experiencing similar things, being called names that are not okay, or when she wears her hair natural, throwing things that are deliberately going to get stuck in her hair. And I think we have to first acknowledge that this is the reality, that this is happening today to our students today and in our community today. And we need to come to the table, and we really need to give a platform for these individuals to express what they're feeling, because I have not walked in their shoes. My children are a minority demographic in that they have unique learning needs, but it's still different. And we need to give them a platform to tell us what they need and to give us something actionable that we can do to start to make this better for them. And so I don't have all the answers. I can't say I would have done better than any board member, because again, I think, wow, that good for those women for coming forward and speaking their truth, but I don't know that there was a great answer in that moment. But I certainly hope that 7 different board members have now reached out to that parent and those other 2 women standing next to her and said, let's talk. So while it couldn't happen necessarily in the meeting, I hope it's happening now.
All right, thank you for that. Next we have Heather. If you want to unmute, you can go ahead and talk to Aimee.
Hi, Aimee. I think it's vitally important for whoever is on the Board of Education to have a working knowledge of the IEP process, since as you said, that encompasses some 2,700 kids. Having been through the IEP process yourself, and given your background as a behavior analyst, what advice would you give to a parent in our district going through the IEP process for the first time?
I spent a lot of time advising parents on that. I encourage parents to do everything in writing because it's dated and time-stamped and there can be no confusion as to who said what and when. I encourage parents to ask a lot of questions. If you don't know what something means, if you don't know what your child's entitled to, point blank, ask the question. If you feel that in that meeting, something was off, don't sign the document. Go and take the document. You've got 10 days anyway from when an IEP is drafted. Take that to somebody who can help you make sure that you have covered all the bases and done everything to meet your child's needs. But the biggest piece of information that I give parents all the time regarding IEP is to help parents understand that they are the head of their child's IEP team. You are not just somebody coming to sit around the table while all these other teachers and professionals tell you about your kid and what your child needs. You are the specialist in your child. You know your child best. You may not be a specialist in speech pathology, in ABA, in occupational therapy, in instructional assistance, all of these different things. You may not be the specialist in those, but at the end of the day, you are the specialist in your child and you are the head of your child's IEP team. And if you are uncomfortable with something in that IEP, don't sign it. Reconvene the meeting if you have to, but keep fighting for what is right for your kid. Make sure your child has every need met that they are legally and rightfully entitled to.
Absolutely. All right, so the next hand we have up is Aimee, if you want to go ahead.
Hi, Aimee. One question I have for you is, as a mother of a child who is gifted, I have felt for a long time that our gifted program in this district falls far short of what those kids need. And I wondered if you had any ideas of how we can improve the gifted education in the district.
Yeah, I think our children with gifted learning abilities are in many, many ways, just like our children who fall under the IDEA umbrella, aren't they? Because those children with gifted learning needs, they have to learn a different way too. They're going to check out, they're going to get bored. They may be ready to go way ahead of the rest of the class and they're kind of bogged down by waiting. And so I would love to see, and I don't know what the feasibility is, but I would love to see us approach gifted teaching in a similar way that we approach special needs teaching, because gifted learners are still in a way a special need of learning. I'm not saying that we're going to necessarily be as formal and federally mandated as an IEP or a 504, but really sitting down and looking at the individual student's learning needs and drafting something that tells us how we're going to teach that individually gifted student.
All right. Are there any other questions for Aimee? All right. Aimee, where can people find out more about you and your campaign?
Yeah, so I'm on Facebook, facebook.com/ I think Robertson for Zumwalt. I'm pretty sure. You can do Robertson and then the number 4 Zumwalt.org is also where I'm at. I'm on Twitter at Aimee for Zumwalt. So you can also find me via email, Robertson, FOR, Zumwalt @gmail.com. You're welcome to reach me that way. I try to be as responsive as possible and as quickly as possible to any questions, comments, anything. I'm an open book. I'm very, very comfortable putting everything in writing and having a record of what I said and being held accountable for my words. So yeah.
All right, and are you planning any more public events that people can meet you at?
Oh, we got a lot of stuff coming up. I'm going to be in your neighborhood eventually. We've scheduled to do some canvassing. I'm going to be at Youth Advocacy Day, and that is, I've got my calendar in front of me, March the 12th, I believe. So if anybody has questions about that, I'd be happy to connect you with those who are in charge. March the 12th. We're going to do root beer with Robertson. We're finally trying to get that scheduled. We had to find a place that does root beer to make it kind of fun. And that is going to be Saturday, March 12th at 5 o'clock. And the location is to be decided, but we're thinking possibly Sugar Fire. We have some Saturdays where I'll be doing literally just 1 hour at a time of lunch. And those dates I will also be posting. And I'm trying to think, we are just all over the place. I will be at the Mayor's Youth Advisory Forum that every candidate was invited to on March the 14th. That is at 6 p.m. I believe it's going to be available online. And that should also be up on my page. So yeah, I'm doing everything I can to make myself as available as possible. If individuals would like to meet with me in person, I'm happy to come for one person. I'm happy to come for 100 people. I'm happy to come to your PTO meeting, to your faculty meeting, to whatever, and to answer your questions. I'm an open book. Any questions you want to ask? If I don't have the answer, I'm going to be honest and tell you, I don't know. I need to look into it. I need an expert opinion, whatever. But if I have the answer, I'm going to give it to you.
All right, and before we finish up, is there anything else you want us to know about you or your campaign or anything else?
The biggest thing I would say is if you're voting based on what is best for the kids and you're trying to choose a Board of Education representative who is interested in the well-being of every single kid, including those who come from homes that align differently from mine, then I'm your candidate. I'm not interested in pursuing politics after Board of Education at all. I have nothing political to gain. I'm here for the kids. I'm here for the educational community. I'm here to keep public schools as strong as they possibly can be. I'm here to support teachers. I'm here to support parents. And those are my #1 priorities. If that's the kind of candidate that you're looking for, if you're looking for a candidate that's passionate about these kids and genuinely believes in this district, then I'm the candidate for you.
All right, and thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us. Just to give a quick little plug for Find the Light, we are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and we maintain the largest collection of mental health resources in the world on our website at findthelightfoundation.org. That was put together by a sophomore at Fort Zumwalt South. So I encourage everybody to go take a look at it. We're very proud of it. And the last day to register to vote is, I believe, March 9th. Is that correct?
March 9th, yes. And on my page, I believe on my website, as well as on my Twitter and on my Facebook page, I do have posts up where you can check to make sure that you're registered. If you've not voted in the last 3 years, you may no longer be registered. At that same link, you can go ahead and get yourself registered. But if you are not registered by March 9th, your opinion will not matter because you will not be able to vote on April 5th. And my slogan is a voice for every student, and I would like every voice to be heard, whether you vote for me or not. So please double check that you are registered to vote prior to March 9th so that your voice can be heard.
Absolutely. And election day is, I wrote it down, I
April
forgot
5th.
already.
Tuesday,
April
April
5th.
5th. Yes.
And for those of you who might be watching this who are seniors, if you will be 18 by election day, April 5th, you can register to vote. And we encourage you to do so.
Definitely. Yep.
All right. Thank you so much for talking with us, Aimee. Thank you everyone for joining us. We will be posting the recording of this on our Facebook page and our Twitter. And Aimee will also have the recording, so I'm sure that that you'll post.
I'll put it on every bit of social media that I possibly can for you. Yes, by all means.
Awesome. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording. Thank you everyone for participating, submitting questions, and our next town hall is on Thursday, March 3rd at 7 p.m. with Jeff Marion. So we'll
Awesome.
see you then.
All right. Thank you guys.